there, and welcome to Spiritual How-Tos. I'm Debbie Cheney, and I am so glad that you've decided to click in. I want to share with you a brief little lesson today. If you had only one opportunity to make an impact on your world, what would you do? How would you pray? One opportunity. Made me think, because there's this guy in the Bible, his name is Agur. And he is only heard of once in this whole ancient piece of literature. He's written about once in one chapter of the Bible. And in his one occurrence, he writes about 6 different questions. He writes about coming generations. He writes about 4 mysteries and 4 small and 4 wise animals. And he writes about 4 stately things. But also in that chapter, this man Agur makes a 2-pronged prayer. Seriously, it had 2 little requests in it before he dies. And his 2-part request is the content for our topic today. His prayer is in Proverbs chapter 30, verses 7 through 9, and it says this: God, there are 2 things that I'm asking you before I die. 2, only 2. Empty out my heart of everything that is false, every lie and every crooked thing, and give me neither undue poverty nor undue wealth, but rather feed my soul with the measure of prosperity that pleases you. Wow, Agur, way to make an impression. Cheers. That's a great prayer. I love that prayer. I really do. We could spend lots of time on the first part of his prayer about emptying his life emptying out of his life lies and falsehoods and all the crookedness in his life. That's a great prayer. That could be a whole topic, but we're not going to spend time on that. We're going to spend time on the second part of his prayer. But while we're on this topic of lies and falsehoods, don't you think it might be good to evaluate our life? I know I used it to evaluate my life to see what lies might be harbored in my heart. And I think whenever we do that, we are pleasing the Lord. So that's just free. That. But when Agur asks the Lord to give him the measure of prosperity that pleases God, that is our topic. That is our content for today. Because what Agur is asking the Lord to do is teach me, Lord, to be content. Teach me to be content. And that is the focus for this brief lesson today, contentment. You see, if we are to believe Proverbs chapter 30, then there is a measure of contentment that the Lord has for you. There's a measure of contentment that the Lord has for me. And learning to be content with what the Lord has for me, without whining, without overachieving, and without comparing, that is one of life's great lessons, isn't it? Learning to be content. But have you, as I have, discovered that it's nearly impossible to be content in this generation unless we have some sort of powerful sense of God's peace and of God's value and of God's purpose in our life. That only comes from God, and God gives us that sense of contentment. You see, we live in a consumer-driven society, don't we? Oh my goodness, it's all about comforts and the things that we can gain by the goods and services that somebody wants to provide for us. Marketing drives are constantly, and marketing dollars are constantly filling up our inboxes, and they're constantly filling up our news feeds and our storefronts and our homes and our offices, and we're bombarded with all kinds of goods and services. And then to top it off, we have technology that comes out with new and improved, and it's all about the new and improved and the latest version. And so we're made to believe that what we have, oh, it's not good enough. We need to upgrade to the latest and the greatest. I get it. I live it. I struggle with it myself. I do. And then to top it all off, this whole press that comes from our smartphone. The smartphone and all the smartphone and all of the algorithms that fuel the dopamine in our head that says, I need more, and that dopamine driven feedback, that loop that makes me want to go back and check, go back and see. I got to check that text message. I got to see who that is. I got to see who's calling. I got to see who notified me. That's an algorithm meant to get us to want more and more and more and more and not be content with what we have. We've been programmed to not be content. Considering that the average person spends 2 to 4 hours a day on social media with a minimum of 2,600 daily touches, it seems as though contentment is far off. And yet, throughout the Bible, we have what Agar asked for. We have that theme to be content with what the Lord gives us pop up over and over and over, because the Lord has pleased to give us a level of contentment, a level of prosperity in which we must find our contentment. And yet, as I mentioned earlier, I think that might be a little bit more difficult without some level of perspective from God. And I think that's why 1 Timothy 6:6 says, godliness with contentment is great gain. You see, I'll feel content. You'll feel content when that is coupled with godliness. That godliness doesn't mean a holier than thou, or I don't get dirty and I don't go anywhere and I don't. No, that godliness means a peace and a presence that comes on our life from God. That means we have a sufficiency because we have God. And so we don't have a press for the necessities of life. It means that we have a mind. Our mind is contented with its lot. That's what godliness means. My mind is contented. Yeah, maybe I wish this and I wish that and I wish this and I wish that, but there's a contentment that says, God, I'm content with my lot. You are all I have, and you will provide the measure of prosperity you are pleased with. That's a mature Christian that can say that. And yet that Greek word for contentment in 1 Timothy, it carries another connotation. It has another slant. And it means this. It carries with it the meaning of raising a barrier to ward off something. In other words, if I'm going to learn to be content, the New Testament meaning of contentment means to raise a barrier to ward off something. Well, what does that look like in my life? In my life, then, that means it's up to me, it's up to you to ward off those influences that are seeking to make you feel that you're not enough, you don't have enough, you're a loser, you live in a loser place, you have loser things, your tennis shoes are loser, your computer's loser, you're a loser. No, contentment means I'm going to ward that off. I'm going to build a wall of faith to quench those fiery darts. No, God, you are my provider. I have you, and that's all I need, and you will provide for me. So it's up to us to raise up a barrier. It's up to us to be possessed with unfading strength. That's what that word contentment means. I have a strength that's unfading in God, who has made me enough, and all I have is enough. He has made it sufficient. So that barrier, it's a fight. It's something that we put up to fight off those influences, those algorithms, those ideas that come at us and say, oh, that's not enough. Timothy says, no, godliness with contentment is going to put you way ahead of the game. 1 Timothy 6:8 says, if we have food and clothing, with this we shall be content. I'm guessing right now you're sitting or standing right there, you're running or walking, and you have clothes on. My hunch is you're not listening to this in the shower. I could be wrong, but my hunch is you have food and you have clothing. Then that's where we find our contentment. Seriously, that's where we find our contentment. Paul speaks in Philippians 4 in verses 11 to 13. Verse 13 we're very familiar with, but verses 11 through 13, Paul talks about, hey, I've learned to face, Paul tells us, first of all, that he's learned to be content in whatever circumstance he's in. Whatever he found himself in, he has learned to be content. You and I both know the dude dealt with a lot of stuff that even was death threats. Okay, and he learned to find contentment in that. In fact, he goes on to say, hey, I've learned to be content while I was facing hunger and abundance. He experienced both. He speaks of being brought low and knowing how to abound, both ends, not having enough and having a lot. He says, I've learned that in every circumstance, I've learned the secret. I've learned the secret. The secret is, and then he says the famous verse, the secret is, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, I can have that meager stock in the refrigerator through Christ who strengthens me. Or I can have that super abundant, overflowing pantry, storehouse, and refrigerator and freezer because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can have a little in my bank account or a lot because of Christ who strengthens me. My sufficiency is in him. I am content in him because he provides for me. That's the secret to contentment. That's the secret to godliness with contentment. Hebrews 13:5 tells us this. You've heard it before. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Interesting that money and contentment are linked up. It's a pretty wise admonition, isn't it? In fact, it's the love of money that is at the root of our discontent, isn't it? When we love and grasp money and possessions, that's what makes us discontent. I was going to go on to the meanings of that. We don't really even need to know. You can look it up if you want. On the notes, there's more there. But we do know this, or at least I've experienced it. Tell me if you have. At the core, at the root of the fleshy part of Debbie, at that fleshy, soulish level of who I am, there is a leech. There lives a leech. And Proverbs tells us that the leech is never satisfied. And the leech always cries out two things. So deep at my soulish core is a leech that cries out two things. And those two things are give, give. In other words, more, more, give me more, give me more, give me more. At my soul, that's what I want. I want more, 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 more. That's not exactly the picture of contentment that we're talking about, is it? So as I wrap this up, my friend, I just feel this sense of there needs to be a cry from within us that says, Jesus, you are enough. You are my everything. Jesus, you are going to give me today my daily needs. Isn't that what he said to pray? My daily bread. Teach me to be content, Lord, with my daily bread. And because you're my shepherd, I'm not going to want anything. I'm not going to need anything. I'm not going to say, give me more, give me more, give me more. Because I've learned to be content in whatever situation I'm in, Lord, because I have great gain with you. Because he'll never leave me. He'll never forsake me. And he will always provide for me the measure of prosperity that pleases him and pleases you. Have a great day. I hope to see you next time. Thanks again for checking in.